The Titanic is one of the most famous tragedies in history, but how much do we really know? Beyond the iceberg and the lifeboats, there are eerie coincidences, shocking cover-ups, and facts that most people have never heard before. Today, we're diving deep into 8 of the most shocking Titanic facts that will change the way you see this historic disaster. Let's get started. Number 1. A book predicted the Titanic disaster 14 years before it happened. In 1898, an author named Morgan Robertson wrote a novel called Futility, The Wreck of the Titan. The story followed a grand luxury ship named Titan, which was considered unsinkable. But in a cruel twist of fate, the ship hit an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sank, killing thousands of passengers. This might sound like a Titanic documentary, but the chilling part? This book was written 14 years before the real Titanic disaster. The similarities are mind-blowing. Both ships were about the same size, both had a shortage of lifeboats, and both sank in almost the exact same location. The eerie coincidences don't stop there. In the book, the fictional Titan was traveling at 25 knots, while the real Titanic was moving at 22.5 knots when it hit the iceberg. Both ships struck the iceberg on the starboard side. Was this an unbelievable case of foresight or something more? While some dismiss it as a freak coincidence, others believe Robertson may have tapped into something beyond explanation. Either way, the parallels are enough to send chills down your spine. Number 2. A fire may have sealed the Titanic's fate before it even set sail. For decades, we've been told that the iceberg was the one and only reason the Titanic sank. But recent discoveries suggest that a fire might have doomed the ship before it even left port. Researchers have found evidence that a massive coal fire broke out in the ship's storage bunker days before its maiden voyage. This fire burned so hot that it likely weakened the steel hull of the ship, making it far more fragile than it should have been. Photographs taken before the voyage show a long black streak on the hull, exactly where the iceberg later struck. Some experts believe that when the Titanic hit the iceberg, the already weakened steel gave way far more easily, allowing the ship to flood faster. What's even more shocking is that some reports claim that White Star Line knew about the fire but kept it quiet to avoid canceling the voyage. If the fire hadn't occurred, would the Titanic have stayed afloat? We'll never know for sure. 3. The rich had a better chance of survival. The Titanic was a ship of dreams for the wealthy, but for those in third class, it became a death trap. While 60% of first-class passengers survived, only 24% of third-class passengers made it off the ship alive. But why the massive gap? It wasn't just luck. Many third-class passengers were trapped below deck as the ship sank. Locked gates and barriers kept them from reaching the upper levels, leaving them with little chance of survival. The class divide was painfully clear even in the lifeboat situation. First-class passengers had direct access to the deck and were given priority, while third-class passengers often had to fend for themselves. Some reports even suggest that officers were ordered to keep third-class passengers from rushing the lifeboats. The Titanic was a microcosm of the society of its time, and for many, wealth was the difference between life and death. 4. The Titanic's lifeboats weren't filled to capacity. It's well known that the Titanic didn't have enough lifeboats, but what's even more shocking is that the ones it did have were only half filled. When the ship began sinking, the crew panicked and didn't follow evacuation procedures correctly. Some lifeboats, which could hold up to 65 people, were sent off with as few as 12 passengers. That's dozens of lives lost simply due to fear and mismanagement. Survivors later testified that as they rowed away, they could hear hundreds of voices screaming in the dark, begging to be saved. But many of the lifeboats refused to turn back, fearing they'd be capsized by desperate passengers trying to climb aboard. If every lifeboat had been filled to capacity, at least 500 more people could have been saved. Instead, over 1,500 souls were lost that night. 5. The Titanic's band played until the very end. One of the most haunting and heroic moments of the Titanic disaster was the band's final performance. As panic spread and passengers scrambled for lifeboats, the ship's 8 musicians made the incredible decision to stay behind and play music to keep people calm. Survivors recall hearing the sounds of violins and cellos drifting over the freezing water as chaos unfolded around them. Their final song? Most reports say it was Nearer My God, to Thee, a hymn about meeting God in the afterlife. None of the musicians survived, but their bravery became one of the most legendary moments of the Titanic's tragic story. Today, they are remembered as true heroes who chose to bring comfort in the ship's final moments. 6. The Titanic's sister ship had a similar tragedy. Most people know about the Titanic, and most know about the Britannic, but if you don't, the Britannic was the Titanic's sister ship that suffered a similar fate. The Britannic, built by the same company as the Titanic, was designed to be even safer. But in 1916, it struck a mine in the Aegean Sea and sank in just 55 minutes, even faster than the Titanic. The eerie part? Just like the Titanic, the Britannic also had lifeboat issues. Many were destroyed when the ship tilted sharply. However, this time, fewer lives were lost since it was being used as a hospital ship during World War I. To this day, both ships rest at the bottom of the ocean, silent reminders of history's deadliest maritime disasters. 7. Some first-class passengers refused to board lifeboats. While most people desperately tried to get onto lifeboats, some first-class passengers actually refused to leave the ship. Why? Some didn't believe the Titanic could really sink, while others thought it would be dishonorable to abandon the ship while women and children were still on board. One of the most famous examples is John Jacob Astor IV, one of the richest men in the world at the time. He helped his pregnant wife onto a lifeboat, but chose to stay behind. His body was later found with $2,500 in cash still in his pockets. Another wealthy businessman, Benjamin Guggenheim, famously changed into his best suit, saying, "We are dressed in our best and are prepared to go down like gentlemen." 8. Titanic's captain had numerous warnings about the iceberg. Captain Edward Smith received multiple warnings about icebergs in the North Atlantic, but did not take sufficient action to avoid disaster. Despite at least 6 ice warnings on April 14, 1912, the Titanic maintained its speed of 22.5 knots, about 26 miles per hour, almost full speed right up until the moment the iceberg was sighted. But why did he ignore the warnings? One major reason was overconfidence in the Titanic's so-called unsinkable reputation. The ship was considered one of the most advanced ocean liners of its time, featuring a double-bottom hull and 16 watertight compartments. Engineers believed that even if 4 of these compartments flooded, Titanic would still stay afloat. This sense of security may have led the captain to underestimate the real danger posed by icebergs, believing that even in the event of a collision, the ship would survive long enough for all passengers to be evacuated safely. Had Captain Smith taken the iceberg warning seriously, the Titanic's fate might have been drastically different. If he had reduced speed, the ship would have had more time to maneuver, potentially avoiding the iceberg altogether, or at least minimizing the impact. Even a slight reduction in speed could have lessened the force of the collision, preventing enough damage to keep the ship afloat longer, giving rescue ships more time to arrive. Additionally, if the warning from the Mesaba had reached the bridge, Smith could have changed course earlier, steering Titanic away from the dangerous ice field. Some ships, like the Californian, had already stopped for the night due to ice, a precaution that might have saved over 1,500 lives if Titanic had followed suit. Slowing down, altering the route, or even posting extra lookouts could have made all the difference. But instead, the ship pressed forward at nearly full speed, and by the time the iceberg was spotted, it was too late. Over a century later, we continue to study and learn from this disaster, uncovering new details that shed light on what really happened that fateful night. What do you think? Could the Titanic have been saved? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a deep dive into history's greatest mysteries. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.